Mimi nimekuwa kwa siasa siku nyingi. Unanielewa? Nimekuwa kwa hii siasa siku nyingi. Na mimi vitisho, mimi siwezi vitisho na mtu. Ati vitisho. Watakuta kwa mwingine. Ati na makelele. Ati tuache kazi hii tunafanya wewe kwa barabara. Sasa mimi nataka niulize nyinyi watu wa Amerika. Si nyinyi na kura zenu ndio mlinifanya nikawa rais na tukaunda hii serikali pamoja? Si kura yenu ndio iliunda hii serikali? Mnataka hii serikali wafanyie kazi ama mnataka ifanyie watu wengine? Si wafanyie kazi. Na ndio sababu mimi nimesema yule ambaye yuko tayari kufanya kazi, mimi nitafanya kazi na yeye. Yule ambaye anataka kuendelea na siasa, aende barabarani, aendelee na siasa. Si 2027 tutakutana na wao. Kwani ni mafundi kiasi gani? Wasituletee nani? Sio kama tunaelewana. Orojo propaganda tu. Sijui nini. Kasongo sijui Ruto Masko. Watu hawana mpango. Ukiwauliza wewe mpango yako kwa wakulima ni gani? Nasema Kasongo. Wewe mpango ya watoto wetu kusoma ama kuendesha mambo ya stima ni gani? Ruto Masko. Sasa mimi nawauliza, tutafuatana na watu wenye hawana mpango? Tuache taratibu hii ambayo tunaelewa ikitoka hapa inaenda hapa.
Mimi leo sitaki kuongea sana kwa sababu mdosi yako hapa. Nataka nisifanye mkutano yangu hapa Meru. Kuna watu naona wanazunguka hapa wako na madharau kidogo kidogo. Hawatujui, hawatuelewi, wanatupima kidogo, wanaona kama sisi ni watu wadogo. My friend, leo ni rais amesimama hapa. Nataka nikuje nisimame hapa peke yangu, ninyoroshane na hao wanaume, niwapeleke mbio mbio. Wakwende wasikwende jameni. Waende wasiende. Waende wasiende. Wapotee wasipotee. Wangapi wanasema wapotee, 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 wapotee.
Amesimama Meru town katikati. Anaambia wa Meru ati yeye ni Mumeru. Ni muongo si muongo? Ni muongo si muongo? Huyu Ruto wako uongo mpaka mimi ninaanza kushuku kama jina yake ni William Ruto. Anaweza kuwa wako na jina lingine. Si ndio? Mtatusaidia tumfukuze? Mimi alinifukuza kwa sababu nilimwambia awache kugawanya mlima. Alikuwa anataka tu wa Meru wakae kando, Waembu kando, Wakikuyu kando ndio atukalie, nikamkataza. Si ndio? Tukakosana na yeye, nimwambia hapana huwa watoto wa Gen Z. Nikamwambia wewe William Ruto hapana iba mali ya Kenya. Mimi nikasimama imara. Si ndio? Nikasema ukitaka kunifukuze nifukuze, mimi niko na kwetu Keberesia, watu wa Keberesia watanipenda, watanikaribisha nyumbani.
Welcome to another episode of Fireside Chat. My name is Leonard Khafafa, and I'm standing in for your usual host, Dismas Mokua. One of our panelists, Mr. Noordean Khagai, is not available today, but we are joined by our very able panelist, Cathy Irungu. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much to our viewers. It's been a great week. Good evening. My name is Cathy Irungu. We've been meeting here on this show. And it's a pleasure to engage once again. And we look forward to a fruitful engagement. Thank you.
Catherine, let's talk about the highlights of the week. What were your highlights for this week?
I think it's been a very interesting week, you know, going by all the happenings in the country and even beyond our borders. But just to come back home and look at what has happened, as a member of the Jubilee Party, it has been one of the best week for us. We've gotten our party back. It's now, I think, 6 days since we got our party party back, the Jubilee Party of Kenya, back to our hands. That is to the hands of Uhuru Kenyatta and the interim or the NEC that was actually elected sometime in 2023. But then, of course, moving to the political happenings, the current political happenings, it's been a very interesting week. Just looking at the levels of attack and what we can call quote political animosity between the opposition and the government. But I really don't like calling it animosity, because most of the time I think politicians can really play games on Kenyans, and I do not believe that things are that bad as they want us to believe. But looking at the mutation of the slogan and the greetings that were started by the Rigathi Gachagua, we started from cousins, and I think right now we are at sisters and brothers. It's quite interesting, and it's something that we'll keep monitoring. It's something that we'll keep looking at. I think this should have come way earlier. Unfortunately, it is coming now. And instead of uniting the country, it's more divisive than, something that can drive unity and ensure that we really relate as brothers and sisters. Far from that is the fact that the finance bill is now passed by Parliament, and we're just waiting for the President to assent to it. And it is interesting how we didn't pay a lot of attention. I know we paid a lot of attention on the finance bill last year, but we don't seem to have paid enough attention this year. But then we understand why that has not been possible with all the police brutality. And I think Kenyans have paid more attention on the police brutality. And we continue to condole with the family of Ojwang, and of course to pray for Boniface Mwangi, who was attacked by the police just the other day. So I think these are things that have captured our minds and the minds of Kenyans. And that is why maybe we didn't pay a lot of attention on the finance bill.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll get back to you on the finance bill and police brutality as this conversation progresses. Let me give you my highlights for the week. My highlights this week are based on the aviation sector. I have a bias. I must confess I have a bias towards aviation.
Are you a pilot?
I'm not a pilot,
okay.
But I'm in that industry.
Okay.
I'm a commentator in the aviation industry.
Okay. So
the things that I picked out early this week were conversations by both the immediate former chairman of Kenya Airways, that is Michael Joseph, and the former Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Both of them spoke about aviation. Let me start with Michael Joseph. Michael Joseph has just retired as chairman of Kenya Airways. I think he's been there for 9 years, and he got in when Kenya Airways was at its lowest, and he has left on a high in the sense that last year's results turned a net profit of 5.4 billion shillings. But Michael Joseph had this to say. He said that Kenya Airways needs to be support. It needs more support from the government than it's currently getting. And I think in a short interview on one of these national TV channels, he actually spelled out why Kenya Airways needs support. Now, this interesting thing is the Right Honorable Raila Odinga spoke at the third cabinet retreat and the midterm review that took place this week. He spoke about aviation as well. And he said that he was rather disappointed that the Adani deal collapsed. It did not come to fruition. He also mentioned that Kenyans actually do need to support Kenya Airways even beyond profits. He says that's the way other airlines all over the world are supported. And he gave an example of Emirates. He gave an example of our neighbor further up north, Ethiopia, that is heavily subsidized by the government. He also gave an example of the new upstart in aviation, that is Rwanda, who are coming up and who are building a brand new airport. And if we are not careful, they might upstage us. And yes, I do echo the words of both Michael Joseph and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga to the extent that support needs to be given, more support needs to be given to the national carrier than is being given at the moment. And I'll give you an example. If we don't support the national carrier, we are going to be run roughshod by Middle Eastern carriers. Just recently, I think on Friday, was it Thursday, Emirates, the airline that comes from Dubai, put out a circular effectively banning Kenyans from using any other airline other than Emirates to transit through Dubai. They say you have to take a ticket on... If you take a ticket, it's not encouraging.
Yeah.
It's not encouraging. And it's something that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think working with the Ministry of Transport, need to respond to. Because these arrangements are anti-competitive. Yeah, they give an undue advantage to Emirates and they disadvantage us as Kenyans. And we can't just keep giving everything that we have to foreign carriers. So I echo that. I reiterate the message that Right Honorable and Michael Joseph has said. The government needs to come in a lot more strongly to fight some of these things. But well, let's take a deep dive, now into the topics of the day. We have police, the police service. Is it force? Is it a force? Is it a service? I think that's a leading question. What are your comments? What do you think? Is it a force? Is it a service?
This is my personal observation, and I know we are good students of history, and we actually know what has happened from time immemorial in this country. I believe that there's something that needs to change. We need to inject some real change into the police service, whether we want to call it a service or a force. To me, it's actually a force. Let me first start from defining it as a force. If you look at how the police force has been structured and how they have been carrying out themselves around here, and the things that have actually happened within that space, since independence and even before, I think we inherited a lot of rubbish from our colonialists. And up to now, it's like there's a couple of things that we've never been able to do away with. Like, for example, the police are supposed to serve us Kenyans. They are not supposed to serve the guys in power, either whether it's the politicians, whether it is the senior people in the police, or whatever you want to call them. I have been a victim personally of police brutality, and not because I had done anything wrong, not because I was a criminal, no, but just because I disagreed with someone who was actually very powerful, and he wanted to use the police against me, and he used the police to silence me. And if you go back, you realize that this kind of behavior did not just start with William Ruto. This is something that has happened with the other regimes, right from Kenyatta's regime, come to Moi's regime, come to Mwai Kibaki regime, come even to His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta just recently. You will read and see, and you can pick footprints where the police force has been used to silence or to attack those people who do not agree with government. And I think it's wrong. So I don't want to get into to giving a solution very quickly before you give me your views as well on what you think about this. Is it a force or a service? But to me, this is a call to action. I mean, we need to now get involved. The people who make policies in this country, we need to restructure this service. We need to relook into it. Because at times I was wondering the other day, by the way, Khafafa, between IPOA and DCI, who is investigating the other? Because one time you hear that IPOA is investigating DCI, is even investigating the men in blue. But then at the same time, you'll hear DCI say that we want to investigate what is going on at IPOA. So really, there's a problem within all these organizations, be it NIS, IPOA, the NPS, and, something needs to happen. And to me, it's actually separation of power. It's actually restructuring so that people become more responsible for their action. You saw these two young policemen taking a gun and actually shooting an unarmed man, actually a hawker in Nairobi CBD, and there's nothing he had done. And you ask yourself, is it that they have gone rogue, or is it that nobody fears anything anymore in this country? Or is it that our constitution is also opening too much space for people to behave the way they want? I really don't think it's the constitution. The problem lies within the fabric of the society. Yeah.
I totally agree with you that it is a societal problem. The force was meant to there have been attempts to bring reforms to the police. If I look back, I think we had reports like the Ransley report that made a lot of recommendations about delinking the police from the politics. Because as long as the police are beholden to politicians in terms of finances, and in terms of promotions, they will always toe the line of whoever is in power. And these attempts were, Ransley actually made serious recommendations in setting up, I think, a police council, in setting up a POA and that sort of thing. But the last administration implemented just a part of those recommendations and then stopped short. So at the moment, the police is still pretty much beholden to the appointing authority, who happens to be the president. And you've talked about culture. Yes, that whole the police culture still needs to have a reset. We need to have a cultural reset when it comes to police. We need to have to look at the way our policemen are trained. We can't actually blame them wholesale because they're basically victims of their own training. They don't know any better. We need to overhaul the syllabus that trains them at Kiganjo so that they do not just become merely yes men who obey orders without questioning. You saw what happened recently when one of the people accused said he had been given orders and he was obeying orders, And even when those orders are illegal, he still felt compelled to obey them because that's the training that comes from Kiganjo. If we retrain them, as Ransley recommended, if we take on a better caliber of policemen in terms of recruits, to Kiganjo say, people now who reason, people who are able to interface with the public better than we are having at the moment, people who have an understanding of the times and the seasons and the situations, and people who are totally delinked from the government or the government of the day, from the executive, let me put it that way, from the executive in terms of funding, in terms of promotion. Then we begin to make progress with the police reforms. And I also think that even we as Kenyans need a cultural reset because we are the people who bribe policemen. We are the ones who are caught with traffic offenses, and we are the ones who are very quick to offer cash inducements to be let off from our traffic offenses. We are the ones currently now teaching our children to disrespect the police. You've seen pictures of engagements of these confrontations of the Gen Zs and politicians and policemen, and you've seen some of them actually spitting in the faces of policemen. That is unacceptable. That is reprehensible behavior. It's totally unacceptable. You've seen images of others actually attempting to wrestle down policemen. That kind of thing. When you're wrestling down a person who has a gun, that is a recipe for disaster because the moment you put him down and he turns his gun and he aims at you, he will shoot in self-defense. So we need to that cultural reset, not only for the police, but also for ourselves. We need to teach ourselves that we must obey the law. I keep giving an example of a situation in Zambia that happened many years ago where a village of about 5,000 people needed to be assembled to be addressed by a certain political figure. And that village of 5,000 was actually oversighted by a single policeman. So word got to that policeman and he was told, you have to get your people to march 5 kilometers away from here so they can sit and assemble and be addressed by a government functionary. And it happened. The policeman actually reached out to entire lot of 5,000 and told them to walk 5 kilometers away, sit, assemble peacefully, and the way to be addressed by whoever it was who was coming to address them. The point I'm making is that when you have a healthy fear of authority figures like police people, then it becomes a recipe for the good maintenance of law and order. But when we look down on them, when the culture is rotten, starting from the policemen themselves and from the population, then it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's true. I think this is something that should concern all of us. Starting with the politicians to ourselves and even the young people who are, just like you're saying, who really engage the police from time to time. And all of us, it's our responsibility to just do the right thing. But the right thing also means that the police know clearly that they're not supposed to shoot at unarmed citizens. And whether they have been sent by whoever, it doesn't matter. These are lives. And we have lost too many young people, especially from last year up to now, and we cannot continue losing more people in that manner. Yeah. And when you look at the way that young man was shot, Boniface Kariuki, then you really understand or get a feeling of how most of these young people who died, the Gen Zs, were killed. And it is really unfortunate because it takes us back there, and it brings some bad blood between the citizens and the police. We also need the police, and as they say, askari ni binadamu, and it's wrong for us. I mean, it would be bad if this situation escalates to something nastier, whereby now the police are not even able to do their work because they have some work to do, and their work is actually to maintain law and order, and they have been doing that very well. But whenever there is some political influence, or they are called on to, to maintain law and order in political situation, then it becomes a problem. So that's something we need to look at as a nation, I believe.
So you raise an interesting observation. They are not all rogue policemen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a few rogue elements. On the whole, the police try, to the best of their ability, to be fair to them. Recently I was looking at statistics. I actually want to quote two activists, actually. I think there's Hanifa, and there's the other gentleman, the one who whistle blew for the Adani thing. I think Nelson is his name. And both of them have said that you're more likely to be killed by a policeman than by a criminal in Kenya. But I want to disprove that, and that kind of rhetoric, tends to now foment more hatred for the police.
It's setting the police against, setting the public against the police. Setting the
public against the police, because it is not true. Statistically, between 2019 and 2021, the number of lives that were lost, I'm taking those years, those base years, because those are the years when I think life was more or less normal before the elections, before all this mandamano and that sort of thing. Statistically, between 2019 and 2021, 500 lives were lost to police action. But statistically, again, 9,588 lives in the same period were lost to homicide. So it's not true to say that you're more likely to die from a policeman's bullet than from criminals. On the whole, they do a great job. And if you want to know that they do a great job, just give an order that all traffic policemen stay home just for a day, and you see the resultant chaos. Yeah, okay.
Especially on our Nairobi roads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, maybe let's take up another topic of discussion. This is a nice discussion. And we're talking about, let's move on and talk about the third cabinet retreat that happened over the week. I think this was, they call it the midterm review. It was the first time that the cabinet, it was the third time that the cabinet was meeting. And one of the observations that I made was that it was the first time that the cabinet was meeting as the broad-based government. Yeah, so last year we didn't have ODM as part of the government. We didn't have ODM as part of the UDA government in that arrangement called the broad-based government. So any interesting highlights that you'd like to pick out from this meeting?
I think, first of all, I believe the reason why the president called this meeting at this particular time is because of all the things that are happening in the country. There's been a lot of hits, there's been a lot of misses, and I'm sure it was a proper moment for him to recount, and it was a proper moment for him to call his troops to order, or even to his house to order. And as they move forward, maybe try to figure out what they're getting right and what they're missing. But most importantly, even looking at next week and the Gen Z mandamano and everything else, I'm sure the president would not want to make some of the mistakes that he made last time. And we saw some people from the executive and even from some members of parliament go around and doing a lot of chest thumping and saying that we are going to do this whether you like it or not. Maybe he took this as a very good opportunity to ask his troops to really take care of what they say out there and stuff like that. But most importantly, and maybe the most exciting for me, was to see Raila Odinga attend that session. One of the days he was there in his full capacity I mean, he didn't just appear as the leader of opposition. Even looking at where he sat strategically, he's in government. He's really in government. It was beautiful to see the old mzee right there. And I want to believe that the cabinet must have benefited from his words of wisdom, from his knowledge and his experience in running government, because he's been in almost all government, so to speak. And I think I looked at the dispatch from cabinet. There was nothing new. There was really nothing new. And we also hope that everything that was discussed and everything that was passed on to us, the cabinet and the entire government, the executive, will adhere to it so that we have a better country and a more peaceful country. Yeah. Yeah,
I agree with you that, yes, the addition of Raila Odinga at this year's meeting was a great thing. It was good to see. And like I said earlier, Raila talked about, among other things, but he talked about aviation and the place of aviation in this country, in the grand scheme of things. And he understood and displayed a far greater grasp of the importance of aviation than most politicians would, or most people in government do. So yeah, to that end, it was a great thing. I mean, there were multiple highlights. I think we had the fact that, as I've said earlier, it was the broad-based, the first cabinet meeting of the broad-based alliance. Then we had this meeting against a background of a lot of tensions, local, that's national tensions, regional tensions, geopolitical tensions, all of them having some bearing on the country. National tensions, of course, arising from previously from Mandamano, which Raila Odinga's ODM party had led in 2023, last year's Gen Z protests, then protests again this year that threatened to culminate in a finale of sorts on Wednesday this week. Then we have geopolitical tensions as well. I mean, rather regional tensions before we even got to geopolitical ones. We have our neighbors, Sudan, still, both Sudan and South Sudan in a chaotic state. We have the DRC, we have Congo, DRC Congo, and the incursions by both, I think, Uganda and other countries within the region. I think the SADC regions, not Uganda, sorry, Rwanda. A bit of Uganda and other countries from the SADC regions, and the hotpot of the hotbed of chaos that it has become, and hoping that stability will be brought. Then, of course, you have geopolitical issues. I mean, like Trump's policies earlier this year. So it's against that background, that I think this meeting has been held. The destabilizing effects of some of these issues on our economy. I mean, the Middle East now has flared up, and we are wondering what does that portend in terms of our petroleum imports. We have the G2G. Will it hold? Was it wisdom in retrospect? Because we've locked certain prices of oil, our oil imports. And chances are, with continued conflict, oil prices may rise. So, yeah, that's what I take. Then I think there were reviews. Reviewing the efficacy of the broad-based government's policies. I think towards agriculture. I think if I become the devil's advocate and I speak for the government, I think they've done pretty well in terms of agriculture, because the fertilizer subsidy has seen the harvest increase, I think, from about 35 million bags in 2023 to 45, I think, in 2024. And it's expected that we could hit 65 million bags of maize in 2025, this year, that is. Then we have affordable housing. Controversial, yes, in terms of the fact that people, there's been a big hit on people's pay slips, but the impact can't be gainsaid, because we have a national housing shortfall of 250 units every year in Kenya. And when the government now steps in to help the private sector redress this shortfall, it has positive effects on the entire economy. Then we have the universal health, the universal health care project, which is, I think, better known as SHA right now, the Social Health Authority, and under it, the various arms of SHA. And this has been particularly effective. I think when the cabinet reviews this, they realize that they have been successful in the rollout to the extent that 23 million Kenyans have registered for SHA against 8 million Kenyans who are registered for NHIF, and in a relatively short time. So those are some of the things, I think, the highlights that I take from this cabinet retreat. But there are issues. I mean, what are your expectations going forward?
I mean, we can only hope for the best because in as much as we're saying that, and just to mention on that issue of SHA, which I'm very passionate about, we say that we have 20 plus million people registered within that system. But then how many people are paying? You realize that most people just registered and they don't do the monthly subscription or the annual subscription. So when I say that we can only hope for the best is that we need to translate this into real change. We need to translate this into real outcomes when it comes to the common mwananchi. Because when you listen to people and when you talk to people, they would love, and everybody in this country, I believe even myself, I would love to see a healthcare system that works, that operates seamlessly at all levels. Yeah. So, as I said, for me, there was nothing new because we what I've seen most of the time with this cabinet dispatch or dispatches is that we really want to give people hope. We really want to tell people that we are aiming at doing our best, or we are trying to do our best. And we really need to put that into practice. That needs to be felt. I keep saying that we cannot just be seen to work, but people must also feel that we are doing something different. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, as in there must be impact. That is not just the optics where we have all these lofty numbers. Yeah. They must be felt on the ground. I think that is the challenge now that the government has. You've raised something.
And at times, just to say something, Khafafa, I actually, personally as a citizen and an active one, most of the time I feel like it's communication on the side of government that is a problem. Because when you read the dispatch, not just this one, but even others that have been there before, you feel like there's too much that the public does not know. Who's going to break this down for the common mwananchi? Because that is a very technical paper. The moment it is dispatched, I'll be able to grasp, you'll be able to grasp, but there are people down there who might not be able to understand. And in the light of all this propaganda, in the light of all this hatred, in the light of all this divisiveness that is being driven by the opposition, then who tells people what they must know? Because they must know the truth. That's bottom line for me.
That is an amazing point because I think one of the outcomes of that cabinet retreat, one of the things that they decided that they were going to focus on was informing Kenyans better. I think they appreciate that there's been a culture of misinformation and disinformation.
Misinformation, yeah.
And there's also been a culture where there are issues, yes, but the issues are then weaponized against the government. I mean, talking about even things like the budget. Let's take this year, for instance. We had the finance bill, which went through the motions. You know, the budget cycle, I think, starts in August of every year, the end of August every year. It's a lengthy process, and it culminates, of course, in the enactment, in the assent, or the presidential assent of the bill into law, after going through all those motions. But at some point, I think Treasury releases the budget proposal, and it is circulated, and in fact, it is even given to the public to participate in reviewing issues that they think are contentious. And this year, I think the cycle has followed the sequential process. You know, from the time the paper was released by Treasury to the point it was taken for public participation, the input from the public. I think it was all inclusive this year, unlike other times when they had token public participation. But that notwithstanding, you still find that there's disinformation and misinformation that is being bandied by anti-government elements. And I'll give you an example. I think there are people who released a paper that actually looks like the budget proposal. And it was, by all intents and purposes, very believable as the genuine paper. But inside it were tweaks, a little tweaking here and there that did not actually reflect the government position. For example, it was said that in those papers that VAT would be raised to 18%. And naturally, Kenyans, especially Gen Zs, got very excited about that. They got very upset about that because having done the math, they reckoned that the price of bread would go up, I think, from by 10 or 20 people. The price of 20 bob, the price of milk would go up. It would actually affect the livelihoods of people. But it turned out not to be true. VAT, there was never any proposal to raise VAT to 16%. Then there are to 18%, sorry. Then there were other aspects where they said, newborns will be taxed from birth. Those were never in the budget proposal. So there's that disinformation that has gone out, and the problem with disinformation is it tends to sell far better than the actual truth itself.
That's true.
And again, as you said rightly, that is usually a failure of government in terms of communicating better, or in terms of nullifying the narrative that runs about that is based on falsehoods. Yeah. Yeah, nice. So we're having a great conversation. You've also mentioned something, Catherine, and maybe I'll just take you back there again. You say that SHA, I mean, it's not just a question of SHA, it's also a question of SHA enrolling numbers, but rather a question of having people actually contribute towards SHA, because there are very few.
Yeah. And I can attribute it to something that I very well know. When SHA was unveiled, or when even the citizens had the first time they heard about SHA, the first thing that went out was actually the negative and not the positive. Then after that, there's been a lot of complaints from the public. You know, when you listen to citizens who say, I've been to this hospital and my patient was not treated or was not treated. But when you listen to majority of the people right now, there's a change. There's a shift from not getting services to getting services. But because of the disinformation and the misinformation that happened initially, some people are still stuck there, because once something has already been let out there and has been consumed by the public, it is very hard for you to counter. Like get it back and counter it, and especially when it comes to health and education. When you think about NHIF, and I was enrolled, I had enrolled for NHIF, I'm enrolled for SHA, but people were paying, especially the SMEs, the people in the in the informal sector, we are paying the 500 shillings, and it was like a chorus. You go to any gathering, and I'm speaking as someone who has interacted with the people as a politician, and you go to any gathering and people would say, we want you to help us pay for NHIF. People looked forward to being NHIF subscribers, and this time around you can see there's a bit of laxity. So maybe what needs to happen to me is that the government will need to run a proper campaign with proper information, and making people even understand. Because you see, when even the change came from NHIF to SHIF, from SHA and all these other things, people don't understand a lot of stuff. And the members of parliament, I remember some members of parliament from my region who went to the ground very early and they started poisoning the public, which I don't think is right. For me, I would actually make a very humble submission to the people and to the citizens of this country. When it comes to health, it's about you. It's actually a very personal issue. It's better to have the insurance. It's better to have the cover than not to have it. Would rather be debating that it's not working than say that you don't want anything to do with it just because a politician misinformed you. Correct. And ask yourself, I mean, for me, because I've seen the minimum that people are paying is around 300 shillings, that is not complicated. It's not hard for people to pay. But what is happening is, what they had initially, the misinformation. But then it is time for now the Ministry of Health, the government, to go out there and do mass recruitment afresh and talk to people afresh and make sure that people understand the benefits of being insured. Because when you look at this country, and especially where I come from, there's a high rise of what we can call the non-communicable diseases. And instead of us doing all the harambes that we do every day, whether for cancer patients, for diabetes patients, for the patients of hypertension and all that, it's better to have a cover. I think for me, it makes more sense to have a cover and not to have a cover. Yeah.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I want to tie in something to what you've said also about having cover and getting people aware so that they can contribute the 300 shillings that they need as a minimum to enroll in SHA. I'm looking at our taxes and our ability to pay taxes as Kenyans. It is said that this country has about 8 million PINs, personal identification numbers. Of those 8 million PINs, 4 million PINs are active. It means the 4 million PINs are dead. They're just there, doing nothing. And of the 4 million PINs that are active, 3 million belong to corporations and 1 million belong to individuals. So 3 million PINs belonging to corporations means that those are the taxpayers, those are the people who pay as they earn. They pay corporate tax or whatever it is. Then 1 million Kenyans are the ones who pay as they earn their income. Yet, out of a country of, say, 54 million Kenyans, we have arguably about 15 million people who are eligible taxpayers, and they're not paying taxes. So you have 1 million people.
You have 14 million that don't pay taxes.
They don't pay taxes, and they ride, and they expect the same level of goods and services as the other as the other 1 million who are paying taxes. What if the government ran a campaign, a sensitization campaign, pretty much the way they used to do a while back, where KRA would say, kulipa ushuru, kujitegemea. What if we enhance that campaign again?
As a citizen, I think one of the reasons why people don't feel comfortable paying taxes, for example, and I'm not one of those evaders, I don't evade, I pay tax. I think there's the element of, we have contributed all this money, we pay taxes, what is that money used for? There's a lot of privilege, there's a lot of wastage that we have seen when it comes to our public servants. And you see all these guys going around with gunias full of money, and you ask yourself, where are they getting this money from? It's taxpayers' money. So there's need for even the people, the holders of power, to show that they are responsible and to stop wastage, because that is the other question. Because when you talk about people contributing into the national kitty, and then you see people misusing the same funds that you struggle so hard, our sweat, our toil, then it is not very encouraging. So it's two-way traffic. I think we also need to show the proper usage of the money that we collect from the public.
I think that's one of the cabinet, that's one of the resolutions of the retreat, that they are going to seal loopholes, they're going to focus more on revenue leakages. And I'm excited, actually, when I see some of the measures that have been taken in this broad-based government. We've seen new measures being introduced, like zero-based budgeting, where, unlike previous times where you had incremental budgeting, meaning the budget, say, for this year was based on last year's budget, so that if last year's budget had made a provision for the government to buy 1,000 cars, this year's budget then started from 1,000 cars and then increased moving onwards. Yet, last year's 1,000 cars were still pretty much serviceable today, because a car is an asset that lasts you easily 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah. So when you do incremental budgeting, as has been done, then it leads to wastage. But when you have zero-based budgeting, every year you start from ground zero. You start from a clean slate, and you assume that you have needs that are different from last year's needs. Then you discourage this, what we've been calling budgeted corruption. Yeah. I think the other thing, again, I'm excited that the government is now implementing is accrual accounting. Accrual accounting, I think, is a system of looking at the bills that are there, these pending bills. We've had a serious issue of pending bills that is a carryover from the last administration. So accrual accounting actually looks at this issue of pending bills, and it's able to pick out the ones that are genuine from the non-genuine ones, and to settle them in a timely manner, because money has to circulate, money has to be put in people's pockets. Yeah. Then we're also looking at e-procurement, I think where you make sure that everything is digitalized in terms of the procurement systems, nothing manual, so that you can't insert figures and enhance the contracts or do whatever it is that the monkey business that has been happening in government. So these are measures that are being undertaken, and I think they are part of this retreat, the resolutions of this retreat. I think my view is that 2025-26, we'll see significant improvements in terms of wastage from government. Yeah. Yep. Shall we talk about something else? Move on something?
Enough.
Yeah.
Sharon.
We can talk about the Matiang'i Factor.
In 5 minutes?
In 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Matiang'i Factor?
Ready? I'm to interrupt. Matiang'i Factor. I think if there's any candidate that should worry the sitting president is actually Matiang'i and not those other characters in opposition. The reason I say that is because he has caused a bit of excitement, especially amongst the young people. It is the young people who came out and told us about they want Matiang'i back. I think as the millennials and the parents of the Gen Zs and all that, we are settled on something different. And there's a reason why the young people believe that Matiang'i is a better president for Kenya. We saw him come back to the country and tell the people, and he made an announcement that he has come back permanently. He's not going back to America. He's come back here to start off his campaign. He's come back here to interact with the people and market his agenda. So for me, as a leader, as a woman leader, I think I have very few words to say to Matiang'i. Please sell us something different. If you're just coming to be as murky or the same as people who've been there before, you better not. You better not. And the reason why I say this is because Kenya is yearning for change. And this change cannot be brought by one individual or one section of the population, say the Gen Zs, minus their parents, minus the millennials, and minus their grandparents and all that. It is all of us that have to come together and agree that we need change in this country. By the way, my belief is that we need to be led into a genuine national conversation that would include Matiang'i, the current president, the opposition, the former regimes, and everybody else who cares for this country, because that time is ripe. Because if, in as much as Matiang'i looks like a very good candidate, and I believe he is, I believe in him, if he goes alone, then we are just going to have what we have seen before, where this organization or this individual comes and sits the other one, but behaves the same way as the other one. And that makes us have a vicious cycle where we have recycled the same people, regime in, regime out. So with the coming of Matiang'i, I expect that instead of even going into the campaign straight away, can we have a national dialogue?
I wonder whether Matiang'i will be an improvement on the administration that we currently have, because everything that this administration has been accused of, Matiang'i has been accused of the same. I mean, when we look at police brutality, we had quite a bit under Matiang'i's watch as the super minister. I mean, those are all these allegations about the bodies that were picked at River Yala under his watch, or these allegations about the bodies that turned up in Savo again under his watch. So do we think it will be a substantial or substantive improvement of what we have? Then again, I ask myself, a lot of these problems that Kenya is currently facing are not creations of William Ruto. These are problems that preceded him. For instance, the issue of debt, public debt. Public debt was taken between 2018 and 2022, unsustainable public debt. Public debt is not bad in itself when it is used for the right things. But when it is used for what I call, quote unquote, vanity projects, it becomes a problem, because vanity projects do not give you the return that you need in order to repay that public debt. So a lot of public debt was taken between 2018 and 2022. And this is the debt that we are now repaying. That's why when you look at our budget, you look at debt itself, I think, debt service, I think, is about 1 trillion shillings. The debt service and interest, I think, come to about 1.9 trillion shillings. I mean, that's what is budgeted for this year. So is it really, is Matiang'i really going to have a magic, a silver bullet that will fix this debt issue? I don't think so. I think he'll do pretty much the same things that William Ruto is doing. He will work with Bretton Woods institutions. He will work, and that's IMF and World Bank. He will do what it takes to make sure that the country remains governable. That's my take. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any counter to that?
Not a counter, really, just an additional. You know, I really disagree with people who think that Matiangi is not any different from William Ruto, or he's not any different from Uhuru Kenyatta, or those other people who were there before William Ruto. Two wrongs don't make a right. I have had a lot of justifications with people who say that we collected more bodies from Riviera during Matiangi's time. But this morning, I think I saw somewhere that there are quite a number of bodies that were collected from Riviera 2 days ago. And yet Matiangi is not the minister for security. So for me, we cannot keep countering each other and saying, you know, even Matiangi is not an angel. He did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason why William Samoei Ruto was able to get where he is as our president is because he promised change, is because he made people believe that he's a messiah that we were all waiting for. And I believe that is why people voted for him overwhelmingly, especially people from some particular regions. So I think, and that is why I'm saying it's time for a genuine national conversation, is because I do not see anyone who has clean hands, you know, so to speak. And therefore, we must come together and say that this is our country, this is where we are, this is what ails us, what do we do? Because I believe, and that is where I think I agree with you, Khafafa, that there's a very high chance, there's a huge chance that even if Matiang'i succeeded, I'm saying if he succeeded to unseat His Excellency William Ruto, he might perform in a similar way, or we are going to, you know, blame him for the same things that we are blaming the current president for. So we need to manage the expectations that is coming from the voters, and we also need to talk to people genuinely. But at times I also say that even Wanjiku herself is not innocent, because Wanjiku, the voter, is also a thug, and we can discuss that next time. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That has been a nice conversation. Thank you, Catherine. I'm hoping that we'll have more of this in the near future. Yeah, that's all for our viewers. Have yourselves a lovely night, and take care. We have demonstrations coming up on Wednesday. I would advise each and every person to be a responsible Kenyan citizen. That's it for now. Good night.